Will managers matter in the age of AI? In a recent interview, the founder and CEO of Airbnb, Brian Chesky, seemed to unequivocally say no.
I don't think people managers will have any value in the future.
Though that seems pretty cut and dry, if you listen to his whole clip, he is actually much more nuanced. And so today, I want to break down what Brian said, what he got right, and what he got wrong so that you are better prepared to lead in the world of AI. Before we start, you might be asking yourself, why should you care what this guy says? Well, for the past 10 years, I've been working with and training leaders at places like SpaceX, Vast Space, the X Prize Foundation, places that are pushing the bounds on what is possible. And so my goal with this channel is to take the lessons I've seen working with some of the most innovative organizations on the planet and make them common practice so that every team can be just as innovative. So if that sounds interesting to you, let's watch the video.
I don't think people managers will have any value in the future. When I mean people managers, people that only manage people. I think everyone's going to have to be a hybrid people manager or manager IC. An engineer would call it they have to be technical. In other words, they have to be, every engineer needs a code. Even the managers need a code. And whatever the version of that is for your field, you need a code. So if you're a lawyer, you're just not managing people, you have to actually read the case law and you have to get involved. And that makes sense, right? Like, you can't just be like these managers where you're kind of people's therapists and you're just doing meetings, you're doing one-on-ones. Like I hear about design leaders that, like, the heads of design, they don't actually manage the design. Johnny Ive manages the design. He designs and he leads people. A design leader who only manages the people, that's crazy to me. The way Frank Lloyd managed his design team is through the work. I say you manage people through the work. You don't manage the people, you manage the work. Otherwise, what are you doing? I mean, yeah, like maybe a couple times a year you should have like a check-in and go out to dinner with a direct report, have a heart-to-heart, ask them about their family, like build relationships. You should do that. You should have relationships. That's not a day-to-day thing.
Okay, so there's actually a lot that I like here, and you can see why I say that it's more nuanced, right? He doesn't just say there's not going to be any people managers. Google tried that years ago. It didn't work. Lots of companies have tried that. It usually doesn't work, especially in large organizations. But he was being very specific about this idea of managers that are pure people managers that have no context for the work. So I want to break this down into two different parts. I want to first talk about what he got right, the things that I agree with, and what he got wrong. Just a quick interjection. I wanted to remind you that I run a company called Built, where we train the next generation of hard tech leaders how to build teams capable of solving the world's hardest problems. If you are an aspiring technical leader, an existing leader, or responsible for training leaders in your organization, please check out builtleaders.com to see if we can support you and your team. And so what I agree with is 100% the idea that managers need context. I mean, in fact, it's amazing. I have a book coming out as I'm recording this. In a few months, I have a book coming out called Minimum Viable Manager. And the whole thesis of the book is that we need more technical leaders. We need people who have the technical expertise to come up. So in that sense, I'm 100% aligned with what Brian is saying. The context really matters. The faster things move and the more employees are able to get done individually, the more important it is for leaders to be able to clearly align their people towards the end result. And in order to do that, they have to know what the end result is. They have to know what they're trying to achieve. And another important aspect of being a manager is helping people make decisions and honestly taking on risk, right? You're the final decision authority said, yes, we're going to do this. And in order to have any sense of whether or not a risk is worth taking, well, you need to have the context. And so with this whole idea that context is an essential element of being a manager, I couldn't agree more with what Brian is saying here. That being said, what do I think he got wrong? Well, first off, I honestly have never worked in a place that has pure people managers. When I was in the Air Force, every leader was also, I was a pilot. And so in my org, every leader was also a pilot, right? Like that's what you were. You were also doing the work until you became like a full bird colonel or something and had been in for 25 years. But even then you still usually kept up flying here and there. At SpaceX, obviously lots of, and this might be kind of biased given where I've worked, but the vast majority, every place that I've worked and the places that I know of people working, there is always a mix. So this idea that there's lots of organizations out there where people are just, where managers are just like psychiatrists for their team, I think that's kind of a red herring. I'm not sure that really exists. But then there's another really important thing that I think he gets wrong here. And it is at the end where he said, first of all, he said, if you have a string of one-on-ones, you're just wasting your time. And sure, like a couple times a year, you should go out with your team and, break bread with them and get to know them. I don't think most people are going to build a strong connection with each other if they're only meeting a couple of times a year. Certainly, once you've been working together for a long time, that can happen. But I think Brian is discounting one, how important genuine connection is, because if you don't have genuine connection, then people aren't going to tell you the truth. They're not going to tell you what's actually happening, especially if things are going wrong, because they're worried about their job. And so now you are not going to have the context, right? So that personal connection is what creates the space for context. And I think it's just important to realize that the amount of work that it takes to build that personal connection is going to be different for every person. For some people on your team, yeah, a couple times a year, you have a beer. If you have a lot in common already, then that might suffice. But if you don't have a lot in common already, if you don't have a lot of context into their lives, it might take a little bit more work. So big picture, I 100% agree with the broader message that Brian is saying here, and that context is a critically important element of being a leader, and it's only going to become more important in the age of AI. That being said, connection is still really important. If you don't have that strong connection, the people aren't going to give you as much information, and it might take a little bit more work than what Brian suggests in order to build that strong connection. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, make sure you subscribe. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, make sure to drop a question in the comments below, and I will see you next time.